welcome to the June edition of Learning Now Television. We're nearly halfway through the year. Can't believe it, but the sun is shining for once here in the UK. I hope it is nice where you are. Nigel, who have we got to bring us some summer magic on the show today?
These are the people who will let the light in, Kate. We've got a really nice interview with David James. He is he's the CLO of 360 Degree Learning, which I'm sure you know well. And they've conducted a whole bunch of research on the attitude of companies, people in companies towards online learning. And fascinating stuff. Far from being, we don't like this is boring, oh, we'd much rather do face-to-face. There's been a real sea change in attitude, probably emerging from the pandemic where that's all you got. So very positive and results for some kinds of learning that is online. Not everything, but for some kinds of learning. So that's well worth listening to and accessing the research. It's a free report. The second person is Nathan Tanner. Nathan is the former CHRO, head of people for DoorDash, which in the UK would be Just Eat, something like that. And he's written a book on executive coaching, on how to be a better leader. But what I love about the book is he doesn't focus on these are the things you have to do. He talks about mastering the internal game as well as the external game, rather like the inner game of tennis, that idea that came out a while ago. If you're not prepared internally, you're not going to do it externally. You won't make it externally. So really great conversation with him. And then good old Robin. Robin talked to Zena Everett. She's an executive coach. And she's talking about badly behaved people, why she loves them, and what you can do to learn from the nature of badly behaved people. So the book is called The Crazy Busy Cure. So sounds interesting. I haven't read it. I hope one day I will be able to. So that's Robin. And then we've got Rob Clark from Learning News. Rob is talking to Fiona Letney and about the latest 9 grid. And he's talking to our good friend, Miles Runham, about other emerging research from them.
Not a bad lineup at all. You won't find us being badly behaved. So
No, you won't. Sadly. Well, you much more lighter than me, Kate. I'm tame and mild, you know.
Can't you see it? Enjoy the show.
We've got an exciting session now with David James, who I've talked to many times on Learning Now TV, and every time we've had something new and interesting to say. David is the CLO, Chief Learning Officer of 360 Learning, and he's talking today about a new report from the company called The State of Online Learning. So thank you, Dave, for agreeing to come on. Thank you for sharing the report with me. But tell everyone, what are the big headlines from this report, and why are they big headlines?
Well, thanks for having me on again, Nigel. First of all, I'm really excited about this report. It's one that I've wanted to run for quite a long time now. Like you and I know, Nigel, from our in-house days, just how difficult it was to get any kind of sustained engagement in our online learning, and then that's not changed a great deal anecdotally over the years. And of course, we have some of the biggest problems that are shared with us candidly by leaders is how do you get people to engage in learning and development, and how do you get people to make time for it? So the alarm bell goes off for me and says, look, are we not asking the hard questions here? What if we did ask the questions that perhaps as an industry, we didn't want to hear the answers to? So we did. We wanted to ask, I love to call them learners, but the people that our customers in company learning and development, what it is that they actually did, and what did they rely on, and what did they expect to be effective in the organizations. Now, look, the headline news, Nigel, is that online learning is really popular, a lot more so than I thought, if before I go to the absolute headlines, when I first we did this via Pollfish, so it's completely independent and it's totally people who use their company's online learning. We were alerted and we were told, first of all, I'm not sure that these responses are going to give you what you wanted. I think that we were hoping for, well, certainly I expected, uh, an absolute kicking from our customers to say, no, we're not interested. Come on, give us something else because we need it out here. Or they're saying to us, no, we go service ourselves on Google and YouTube. We don't care what you've got, but they didn't. And so the headline is like for the big headline question. Think about the last time you acquired a new skill that helped you do your job better, and we wanted to be really clear here. What helped you master this new skill? Number one, so we got responses from the US, UK, and France. Number one across the board was online training provided by my employer. Now that's unambiguous. We wanted to be really clear, and we didn't want anybody to think, is it online learning if I find it myself on Google? If this is sent to me, or this is part of an online qualification? No, this is online training provided by my employer, and it was number one with 69% with the US, 63% with the UK, and 67% for France. So it's unequivocal. Number two in that list came from learning directly from my peers and colleagues, which was 58%, 55%, and 46%. Likewise, US, UK, and France. So the headline was, Nigel, that I'm quoting my lines from the report here, it's expected and respected. I mean, who would have thought it?
Who would have thought it? And why do you think that is? Do you think that's to do with the pandemic, where we had to get used to online, and now people have become habituated? So far from being the least worst option or the worst option, but better than nothing, it's become the preferred option. Do you think that's the reason, or do you think is the quality of the learning getting better? You tell me. What do you think?
So, Nigel, I've got Laura Overton's words in my ear here, telling us that this is the data, and of course we need more information. But then I am one to speculate, so I will go deeper, and I think that has a great deal to do with it. If you think of the two big things that changed, number one, online became the go-to in the immediate aftermath of COVID. Plus, there's more remote working. So number two there, learning directly from my peers and colleagues. I would have imagined if we'd run this report 4 years ago, whether that would have been number one, because you're role modeling as much as you're working alongside. So I think that there has been this shift, but it doesn't look like it's been done reluctantly at all.
No, it doesn't. And it must have something to do with the quality of what is received. But I don't think people would say by far the most outstanding way to learn new skills for work is this dreary, boring e-learning stuff that I absolutely hate. I've got really good access to resources. I've got all sorts of ways of learning, all of them mediated by online through my laptop or whatever. Would you agree that there is a marked change in what we mean by the quality of the material? And secondly, I just want to pick up on 360 learning. 360 learning says it's about communal learning, community learning, group learning. Do you think that's got something to do with it? That people are working more collectively, collegially, than they were previously. It's not this head down, on your own, no one cares, do it yourself kind of stuff.
Yeah, so to answer the first part of the question, yes, I do think the quality must have gone up. We asked people to tell us select words that described their relationship or their assessment of online learning, and the two most popular were interesting and useful. I mean that's a home run as far as I'm concerned. We shouldn't really be aiming for much else, should we? The usefulness, number one, and interesting alongside that. But interesting, we asked another question around please rate the following in terms of how much they have helped you do your job better. And number one was learning from my colleagues at work. The next one was learning from my manager. And thirdly was online training. So if we're going to pull this apart, there is a preference for online learning for all of the reasons that we know, and it states it on the report as well that there's a flexibility, it's just in time, that it's adaptable, and all of those things that we know around the convenience of it. But when it comes to, and again, the question we wanted to really hammer home, this isn't your preference, it is please rate the following in terms of how much they have helped you do your job better, which is not talking about learning, which we love to talk about, but the reason that there are learning and development departments. And 91% of respondents in the US said that learning from my colleagues at work was either very helpful or helpful. That goes up to 93% for the UK, and again 93% of France. So we've got these. We're not resisting your online learning anymore. In fact, and we overall, respondents rated it 4 out of 5 stars, like in terms of its effectiveness, and that goes up to 5 stars for organisations less than 5,000 employees as well. But there is this slight gap, which I think is the so what of the report when it comes to actually relying on it to help you to do your job better. Learning from colleagues is still out there at number 1.
Yeah. Do you think that people are beginning to pull a portfolio together so that they recognize that there's something useful coming from online, but they also recognize that it's very, very helpful to have that reinforced or have that introduced or to have that tested by their colleagues? So instead of this binary view, it's either this or it's that. This report seems to be saying both and is actually a pretty good way to go. Do you think that's a message they're coming through?
I do. When you look at the criticisms of online learning, as well as it being static and the lack of interaction, people pointed to the relevance. And of course, this is often the case, because if it's off the shelf or generic content, then it doesn't actually talk to anybody about how to be successful in your organization, where learning from peers fills in those gaps. So what we've got to think about is, but not just the technical aspect of the development of skills, which the off-the-shelf and the generic can help with, but the proprietary, which is how to be successful in this organization. Now, you and I have worked in some pretty unique organizations, you at the BBC, me at Disney, and I've never worked anywhere like it, and I've never heard anybody talk about anything like the culture at Disney. And my success at that organization came down to my ability to read what was going on, to try stuff, and then do more of what works and less of what didn't. And I'm sure you had the same at the BBC, Nigel.
Yes. It's like, to me, it's like riding a wave. You can either crash into the wave and let it drown you and fight the water the whole time, or you can just turn your back and go with that flow, and the flow carries you forward. You're absolutely right. And in some ways, there's a really big point there about learning. If it doesn't suit the culture of the organization, if you can't adapt the organization to embrace the new learning opportunities, and you fight it, you make it compulsory, you have to be there, you do all these things, you end up with a confrontation where everybody loses. And no one wants to be forced to do anything, they're alone forced to do learning. So I think that's true. And the methodology that you've just described allows that adaptation, doesn't it? Because you're working with your peers and your colleagues, that's part of it. And you're also working with other resources which can't be supplied by peers and colleagues. Together, you end up with something quite powerful, which is at the heart of 360 Learning's philosophy, isn't it, really? That they're not saying the only thing you can do is sit there in front of your computer. They're saying there's some really useful resources here, but so is talking to your colleagues, working as a team, thinking it through as a group. All of that stuff contributes towards effective learning inside the organization. And this report would, I think, endorse that view. It seems to me that it would endorse it anyway. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%, Nigel. Where we've taken this, which I think is great news for learning and development, we've come an enormously long way, but there is one element to this, which is the Achilles heel of learning and development that we need to address, and that's impact. These things are really expensive. We are relied upon to close skills gaps, which are growing in our organizations, which has been recognized as the number one bottleneck, according to CEOs, to the growth of their organization. And of course, skills gaps are currently costing global economies 6.5 trillion. Right, this is a real problem. So what we need to do is we need to take this great progress that we've made, and now we need to point this in direction of planned and demonstrable impacts. And so my recommendations, not to spoiler alert, is that if we capitalize on the progress we've made with online learning, it's expected and respected now, and incorporate learning from peers, as you mentioned earlier, collaborative learning at its very heart there, to help to unpack how to be successful at any given organization, gluing together the technical skills and the proprietary skills so that we're giving everybody who already works in our organization the opportunity to grow their careers here where we are, rather than necessarily just do this from generic or off-the-shelf content where you're growing the technical aspect but doesn't prepare you in any planned and impactful way to be successful where you are. So we're saying glue the two together, provide online learning at scale that capitalizes on the know-how of successful employees at your organization, and plan to make the impact, plan to upskill and reskill within your organization, and then you stand a much better chance of having done so. It removes the hope, Nigel, that many of us may have when we launch a new system with more engaging content, and then we sit back afterwards, we wonder, did that make an impact? Because if we don't plan to at the outset, and we don't know what those skills are that we're looking to address, then we can't enlist the experts within our organization, and we can't deliver online learning at scale to make planned impact.
It's true. And I think we should end there, because that's a real high. But what you're saying is that this report, independently done, so you didn't start out with this is what we have to go and find the people to answer the questions in this way, completely independent report, seems to back the direction of travel that 360 learning is going in. In other words, to meld people and their expertise, resources and their expertise, and target it on those gaps in the organization. Let people work out what they need to do in the team and manage that process by mixed media, essentially, real people, real resources. And together, if you have that in mind, and I think that's a really important point, if you start off with that in mind, the end in mind, we've got a key to something really important here. And that report backs it all up. And you see it on the screen. There's a crawl there. The report is free to download. Anybody watching this and interested, please download the report. Please read it. It's well worth the read, and it gives you ammunition. If you want to go back to your manager or to the CEO and say, look, this works, here's the proof. And it is proof. So David James, 360 Learning, as always, a great pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for introducing a really important piece of work, but not only that, kind of a frame of relevance that you've wrapped around it, which I think is extremely important. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Nigel.
At TechWolf, we realised that HR didn't need another HR application. They needed relevant skill data. Our skill data infrastructure works in the background to not only connect HR data, but business systems where employees actually do their work and skills are demonstrated. Our advanced AI structures skill data into a tailored skill framework in the form of a taxonomy and mapping of your jobs to skills. TechWolf creates relevant, granular skill profiles for every employee. Our API then automatically gets that skill data into the systems where it can be used by the business. We also take privacy very seriously, and TechWolf is trusted by global companies.
Next up, Rob Clark, on the ball as ever, is interviewing a couple of people that we know very well from Fosway. He's talking to Fiona Lettany, who has been part of a new paper, disruptive white paper around large enterprise learning. It is excellent. For anyone who's ever been confused about an LXP versus an LMS, any of that, go and read it. It's really, really well worth, part of your time. I know I used to work for Fosway, but I really, really enjoyed reading that paper, and I've shared it with lots of people since. And he's also talking to Miles Runham from Fosway about digital learning, as well as our good friend Nick Jones, who has all the latest stats on remote and hybrid working in the sector.
We look at the complexity of learning systems in the largest organisations and the systems vendors that serve this segment of the market. Almost everyone in L&D now works hybrid or remotely. Just 2% are fully office-based. We have the latest statistics on hybrid working in the sector. Miles Runham from Fosway joins Learning News with this year's digital learning market vendor positioning. Large enterprise learning, one segment of the learning market that many aspire to deliver in, to be the strategic choice of the largest organisations and win the biggest deals. The revenues are very large. They involve serving hundreds of thousands of learners. Yet, despite over 1,000 learning systems on the market, today the large enterprise segment is served by just a handful of vendors. Market consolidation and investment by the HCM providers in their learning modules has left very little choice for the very largest organisations.
The vendors that can meet the requirements of large enterprise learning, we put above the top line. So it's those that are across that high potential area. People often ask the question, why are they up there and we're not? And a lot of the vendors want to be in that strategic leaders zone. They were all built to service the large enterprise organizations. Those HCM systems, they are focusing quite strategically on the learning modules that they deliver as part of their HCM. And quite often you'll have a CIO or CCO that wants to consolidate the systems, and therefore as a learning and development department, you have to justify absolutely why those learning modules will not deliver for you. And asking the question, what's the difference between HCM and best of breed? Functionally, less and less these days, because they're adding quite a lot to it. But there are certain areas that they maybe don't do, and that's where you need to kind of focus on those areas.
Are you talking here into more the LXP type functionality?
And we call them specialists. But there's also those that are adaptive. There is the extended enterprise piece as well.
The paper talks about vendors being strategic partners with customers.
This came across in nearly every interview that I did with the corporates. It was about partnership. I feel as though you both had skin in the game and, going to work together.
The annual L&D Work and Salary Survey tracks the number of L&D folk working remotely and how they feel about hybrid working. Around half currently work fully remotely and the other half are hybrid. Almost no one in L&D currently is fully office-based. Here's Nick Jones from Recruiter Blue Eskimo.
What we see at the moment is quite significantly stark. 46% of all L&D respondents to our survey work fully remote. So not hybrid, entirely remote. We've got about a quarter of all respondents that work 2 to 3 days in an office, and we've only got 2% of people that actually work 5 days a week in an office. It is very clearly something that people want to do and want to continue to do. But what people really want is flexibility. They want a hybrid environment, but they also perhaps want the same experience when they do go into the office that they had, pre-pandemic. And of course, that's not the reality. So what we're seeing is people that are being asked to go back to an office in a hybrid fashion or permanently are finding that colleagues aren't there. The social experience is not the same. Those older offices, open plan offices, it doesn't work. Essentially, if you're going to sit and do a Teams call with colleagues, the general trend for home working, in our experience, is not going to change.
Learning News spoke to market analyst Miles Runham on vendor positioning in the digital learning market.
The 9 Grid intends to help buyers sort of navigate their choices in the market. It places the vendors on the grid in terms of their commercial performance, and then the vertical axis in terms of their solution potential. And then in terms of their size, relative size is about market presence. And then there's cost of ownership and sort of performance and potential trajectory in there. Those are the factors that play into the positioning on the grid. We've seen a sort of general trend to the left in terms of performance as some of those commercial and market challenges have played out. So that's been a factor. Then we've seen some interesting specialisms arrive as well, and some intensity, so more competitive intensity behind some of the dynamics that show on the grid. There's been a lot of competition and increasing competition for sort of strategic partnership status, particularly for larger customers. And so providers trying to find more strategic long-term relationships. There's some very interesting competition emerging around sort of the technology and digital skills areas where, the idea of skills validation, testing, and assessing and practicing skills for technology are emerging, and that's becoming quite a hot space as well. One of the things that I've been encouraged to see is increased sophistication in terms of the design approaches as well. The learning market has always been very careful to be as strong as possible, at least in terms of the application of sort of evidence-based practice. I think we see more neuroscience in the conversation, more behavior change and behavioral science in the conversation, really focusing on those sources of evidence to impact performance. It's been encouraging to see some of that sort of behind some of the positioning on the grid as well.
And that's learning news this June. Thank you for watching. See you next time.
Upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. And get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
And Robin continues his unbroken stint of finding interesting people and interviewing them for us. Today, he's talking to a coach called Zena Everett about her book, which is called The Crazy Busy Cure, and why badly behaved people at work interest her much more than nice, calm, even-keeled people. So listen to what she has to say to Robin. Fascinating stuff.
Zena, thanks ever so much for joining me on Learning Now TV. And one of the things that really interested me when I first came across you was the idea that you'd written a book called The Crazy Busy Cure in 2021. An intriguing title, but what prompted you to write it? What was the impetus for that?
Well, in a horrible moment of disclosure that I might regret, years ago, Channel 4 did a documentary on the 7 deadly sins, and I was the antithesis of sloth. So I was running around London thinking like I was a master of the universe, like The Apprentice, one of those candidates, and literally a crazy busy fool. And the sloth guy was, I think, lying on a sofa. I can't remember how many. So this was a good 25 years ago. A good 20 years ago anyway. And the sloth guy was, eating junk food on the sofa, and he's probably invented something now. He's probably some kind of tech billionaire because he was thinking. And I thought it's great to be busy. So I had a recruitment business and maybe I was busy. I don't know what I was doing. Anyway, the power of wisdom has made me realize that crazy busy is not a good thing. So I'm a coach, and I would realize that my clients who were able to pay attention to the right things all the time were far more successful than their crazy busy colleagues. And I realized that obviously what we focus our attention is the most important thing. We are what we do all day, and we are what we think about all day. And this has become even more important now, because people say to me, I have more meetings in a day than I had 2 years ago in a whole week.
And obviously, Learning Now TV is focused around learning and development people and the people who are involved in learning either for clients or within their organizations. And very often we're asking people to do something different. We're asking them to do something new. We're giving them new skills to do new tasks using new equipment, new software, or whatever it is. How does that contribute to that sense of crazy busy? Because it feels to me that sometimes we're actually adding to the problem.
Yeah. Well, I feel when I talk to clients, I kind of get this image that everything is falling down on their heads, that everything is just piling. And it's in our nature to say, yeah to stuff, but not actually think, when am I going to do that? And people, we do not talk about time at work anymore. So your clients are knowledge workers who are paid to think, and they're paid for their ability to solve problems, aren't they? Ultimately, in organizations, that's what we're there to do. We're there to solve problems, spot problems, solve them, create opportunities. Otherwise, all those other jobs are going to be automated. We don't say to somebody, great, you're going to get involved in that project. You know, you're planning the Christmas party, let's say simply. Planning the Christmas party. So how many hours a week is that going to take? 5 hours a week. Right. What are you going to stop doing to make space for that? And, you know, there's all those cliches about time management, but it really is finite. But somehow I don't think people have got the message. So I've got a model in my book on how to create some headspace, time to think, to learn, to research our market, to look at what our competitors are doing, all the things that people in organizations should be doing. But in order to complete the model, they have to know how long it takes to do their tasks, then how many hours a week they get of extra curveballs, some of which they need to say no to, but some of which they can do because they give them access to something new. And then how much time they do on routine, kind of, can we say crapola? You know, just stuff that should be outsourced, automated, or they just stop doing. And they can't do it because they don't know how long it takes to do their job. Whereas their manufacturing cousins would know exactly. They wouldn't say, oh, let's see, I don't know how long it takes to make a car. Let's just figure it out as we go. Well, we don't know. So you don't say to me, hey, Zena, do that report, and it should take you 45 minutes. Or, look, I've noticed you spent 3 hours on that PowerPoint. We don't talk about that because we feel, I don't know, what do we feel? Do we feel it's micromanaging? So we have to, I have more than one organization I work with now mandate the amount of time people can spend in internal meetings. And they say, if you're adding something in to your week, you've got to come out of something else. You know, it's really good. And people are so relieved. They don't feel that's Big Brother stuff. They feel actually this is an organization taking responsibility for systemic problems.
Yeah. And when we introduce change, whether that's through a learning and development piece, or it's a communications piece, or it's a big rah-rah conference, and we say we're going to do things differently and all the rest of it, the space to enable that to happen is, as you say, it's not mandated, it's not kind of described, it's not, people are not given a heads up to say it's going to take this long or that long, or those things. But also there is this terrible curse of the multitasker. The people who think that they can do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and switch between them, and all is, oh, we can do this multitasking. This is my superpower. And of course, we know that they're not actually multitasking. They're rapid task switching and not actually concentrating enough. So that idea of this should take you 45 minutes, or that PowerPoint took you 3 hours, or whatever it was, that's because it wasn't 3 hours spent doing the PowerPoint. It was probably only about an hour spent doing the PowerPoint and 2 hours of doing other stuff in the term of multitasking. Is that something you notice a lot with the people who you coach? Because as a leadership coach, you're talking to leaders who are basically going, when am I going to do all this stuff?
Absolutely. And we've kind of kidded ourselves that we've got to be available all the time to people. We really don't. You know, we really don't. You and I are no spring chickens. We can see, look, we're no spring chickens. And, you know, we didn't need our manager to be available to us all the time when we were, you know, it's the last thing we want. But we'd enjoy our chats with them when we did. So, and people had lists. So I'd say, oh, Robin, I've got a meeting with Robin at 3:00. Let's go down the list of everything for Robin. Whereas now, you know, successful people are still boundaried and they still have lists. our crazy busy cousins who create all the stress, doing everything at the last minute. So I often say to people, you need more communication. You need more touch points with Robin. You need to say to Robin, hey, I've noticed, which is a really nice way of opening the conversation. I can't say, Robin, you're driving me crazy because you are crazy busy. I say, hey, I've noticed, Robin, that you often email me at 7 o'clock in the morning with information that you need for 9 o'clock. Why don't you and I catch up a couple of times a week so I know what you've got coming up in your diary, so therefore I can preempt things. So I think we need to learn how to do these things. And it's kind of a skill that's gotten because somehow we've kind of seemed to have internalized the message that managers need to be there for people all the time. And they don't. We need to give them the gift of time and space to do their jobs. And, we know this is flow, don't we? When I was growing up, this used to be called getting your work done or concentrating, but now it's called, optimum concentration. And we've researched Navy SEALs and all this kind of stuff. And you think, oh my goodness, what? It's just getting your work done. Like, why is this a thing? Just get your head down. You don't have to have noise cancelling headphones, but if you need to, that's absolutely fine in a busy office. And that works for your brain. But just doing something without interruption. And really, we know, I go bonkers if I can't have a couple of hours of that a day. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. But organizations, I really think, have a duty to allow people the space to work in flow, to have uninterrupted time to work.
Absolutely. I think learning and development teams could learn something from that, because I think one of the things that we see is that we're asking people to do things differently. We're asking people to take on new tasks or new responsibilities or new accountabilities. And yet we kind of just assume that it's going to happen because they've been asked to do it, rather than help them sculpt their week or sculpt their day to make the space to happen. Is that a responsibility that learning and development teams in the organizations that you work with are starting to take on? Are they starting to say, you need to make this much space available. Let's see where that's going to happen.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I say, that is managing. It's not micromanaging. It's managing with care and ease, I suppose, to make it sound really new agey. But I think, I think it's a needed conversation. And let's face it, learning and development teams themselves, anybody in a business partnering role like that will be completely overwhelmed and, feel that they need to respond all day. I did work with one similar, very, very busy team where they said, we're always available after 12. So obviously, if there was a drama in the morning and they were really needed, that's fine. But actually, that allowed them to do their work in the mornings, to have their thinking time, to write, do their briefs, and they needed to do. But then they could have all their meetings in the afternoon. So I think we all need that kind of conversations about time and how we need to change. Well, in a perfect world, people say, I mark when I'm not available, but I feel really guilty about that. I think we should mark when we are available. And then the rest of the time is time to get on with our tasks and do it well. But that needs real ruthless boundaries. And some of my clients, my most successful clients, are really boundaried in their time. And they have lovely ways of saying, I love to get involved in that, but actually I just don't have the time to do it justice. And a simple thing, I'd love to sit in on that training course and observe, but I haven't got time. I'll set someone from my team, or I'll come in for half an hour before the break for lunch, and then I'll chat. And I'll ask people how it's going and what they've learned from it. Rather than, we do a lot of mindless stuff because we're too tired to stop and ask the questions. Why are we doing this?
And it's exploited by people who are, on occasions, not very nice. And that brings me to your current book that you're working on, which is called Badly Behaved People, which I was intrigued by. So why write a book about people not being very nice, and why write it now, Zina?
Do you know what? I think Not Very Nice People probably, hopefully, might not be such a compelling title. I think I didn't call it Bad People. I called it Badly Behaved People. Because I think under stress and with lack of communication and not enough time to talk, people behave badly. And, crazy busyness crowds out communication. Because we're so crazy busy, like spending time on these tasks and being interrupted, we don't have time to actually say, hey, Robin, how should we work together? Or, when you do that, I thought you meant this. Is that the case? And a lot of the composite case studies in the book, I'm just putting the word composite in there so I don't get sued. But a lot of them come about because people assume they know what's going on with other people because they don't want to ask. They put themselves in their shoes. Well, that's no good because I'm just laying my own perception on top of you. And I think also, people are wired and tired at the moment, so they do behave badly because they're stressed and they're under pressure, and we're not together enough, so we don't have time to talk. So all this bad behavior comes out under stress.
Yeah. And sometimes that bad behavior, and you rightly make the distinction between bad people and badly behaved people, or people behaving badly at that moment, seems to be a kind of result of a lot of the things that we're throwing at people, which in some ways links very neatly back into the crazy busy cure, the idea that we're just layering people with too much stuff and not giving them the support and the help to jettison some of the things which are slightly less important because it's just too tricky. I think it's a rich seam that you are mining, Zena. I look forward to the release of the book, which is towards the end of this year.
It's coming out in December. I know. I'm already getting ideas for badly behaved people too.
Yeah. Well, but badly behaved people, for the person who you'd really like to have that conversation with for Christmas, this is ideal. So, Zena Everett, thank you ever so much for joining us on Learning Now TV, and have a great rest of the day. Cheers.
Are you ever in meetings or events where one or two people dominate? It doesn't have to be that way. You can get an equal voice for your people through liberating structures. Liberating structures are 33 structures that give people a full equal voice. Check them out on www.happy.co.uk and type in liberating structures. We do them online, we do them in the classroom, and they are brilliant.
It's my pleasure today to get the chance to have a discussion with Nathan Tanner. Nathan is a coach, an executive coach, but he's also the former HR director of DoorDash, which says it obviously what the company is all about. But he was the HR director, and he's had previously a career in finance. He was at Lehman Brothers and all sorts of other interesting places. So he's had quite a journey. And what I want to talk to him about is partly about executive coaching, but much more about a book that is just on the market. It's called The Unconquerable Leader. And first of all, I want to say welcome, Nathan, and congratulations on the book.
Nigel, thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
Now, let's just jump straight in to The Unconquerable Leader. What I loved about the book is that at least half of it is called the internal game, and the other half is the external game. And very few books on leadership recognize that there are human beings involved. It's all about what you do, what you present. What you're saying is that if you really want to succeed, you've got to manage your inside life, your internal views, your internal voice, as well as your external voice. Now, just how did that happen? Just tell me the story. How did you come to that perception that you have to balance those two things?
So it started with my own journey. I was in several leadership roles, and most of the training I had received was on how to set expectations or give difficult feedback and delegate and hold people accountable. All of these things that we often learn in manager workshops or trainings. And personally, I felt like the bigger challenge was managing all of the stuff going on inside of me that ultimately impacted how I lead. And then that came out when I transitioned to being an executive coach. And my job is to help world-class leaders be even more effective. And so I thought, okay, most of my focus might be on the external game. How do I help with all of those things that I just listed that get a lot of attention from most leaders? But what I found was the bigger challenge with the leaders I worked with, similar to me, was the internal game, the stories that we tell ourselves, the self-confidence that we have, or self-doubt, mental and emotional resilience, sleeping, relationships with a spouse or significant other. All of these things impact how we show up at work. And I found out like that is actually the harder thing to manage. So it was both from my experience as well as from the clients that I work with.
And what I loved as well was your acknowledgement that when we're doing anything really, we have this internal conversation with ourselves going on constantly. And the conversation can be, "You screwed that up," or "Why did you say that?" "Oh, come on, keep calm, stay calm," or "Don't get angry, don't get." We have this constant internal monologue going on, and very few places where they deal with leadership development ever talk about that or ever see that as particularly significant. You raise it right to the surface and say, we have to master the language that we have, the conversations that we have with ourselves. And we have to make sure that that is the right conversation at the right time. I think that is a very profound point. And you give an example of that in the book, don't you? At the very beginning of the book, you talk about running a triathlon and that incredible conversation that we have. "Come on, don't give up. You can do it. Oh, I feel terrible. I just think I should finish at the next corner." And it's constant. It's a constant conversation with yourself.
Yeah, I've found, Nigel, that the most important story we will ever tell is the story that we tell ourselves. And we're telling ourselves stories all of the time. It started with me in my youth. I was a little bit overweight. I couldn't run the mile I was probably 12, and we had to run it every single week in school. And I could make it about halfway through before I needed to walk. And so I told myself this story, "Oh, I'm not a runner," or I'm not healthy. And it's incredible how that story stuck with me for the longest time until it was like, you know what? Like, that's a bad story. That's not a story that I want to live anymore. And ultimately, I tell the story of doing this Ironman triathlon, which was a very big feat for me. But it's a lesson that I've seen in all of the leaders. And I think it starts with recognition of, okay, I'm telling myself this story. Here's the story I'm telling myself. Like, let's just call it out explicitly. Do I want that to be the story, or can I tell a new one? And once you recognize that you want to tell a new story, then you can start finding evidence. You can run a quarter mile or a mile or whatever it may be. And that, I think, becomes foundational in change.
Yes, and I also think that's true with leaders, that many more leaders, many more people who aspire to leadership have those doubts. I'm not really, I don't think I could do that. Oh, why would anyone listen to me? Why would anyone follow me? Oh, that organization could collapse if I did a really bad job. So the doubts overwhelm but you're a good person. You know what you're doing. You've got a lot of respect from your peers. You can do a fantastic job. And that's what the external world kind of sees, the confident person who's up for it. The truth is that it's the internal voice that you hear much more than you hear from the accolades from outside. And I think that's a really wise and profound point, that master the internal voice, change that narrative, and you begin to change your external behavior. And that's why in the book, it's internal game, external game, internal game. They're the three parts of the book. And I thought that's very wise. It's not internal game, half a chapter, external game, 25 chapters, conclusion. You really balance that out because you think those things are very, very important.
Absolutely. Spot on. Yeah. Two-thirds of the book is focused on the external game. because I found that is the critical piece. The external game is hard but learnable. The internal game requires a lot of work, and I intended this book to be very, very actionable. At the end of each chapter, there are invitations to act, because that's when change happens. You can't just read a book or show up to a workshop and expect to improve. There needs to be work. There needs to be action that takes place as a part of that.
You're right. In spite of what they say on the covers of, particularly of leadership books, read this book, it will change your life. Read this book and you will never have another, whatever it might be. No, it's not true, is it? It's read this book, think very hard about it, take action, sometimes difficult action, make decisions which are hard for you and perhaps for those around you or for your organization. Then you might see some change. Can you highlight, just in the internal game, just highlight one thing, one big message that comes out of the internal game, and then the external game, one message from the external game, and then we'll wrap up.
One of my favorite lessons from the internal game is the gain versus the gap. And so the gap, and most of us operate from the gap. This is, I look ahead at the person that I want to become, and all I see is this large gap. And I don't know if I can close that gap. Am I making progress? I don't know. And seeing that gap regularly becomes very demoralizing. We see this large gap and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can overcome it. I encourage clients and readers, instead, let's focus on the gain. How far have you come? Let's look back. And I always do this to my clients, like, let's look back, Nigel, 1 year. Who was that person a year ago? How have you grown and changed? And then let's use the positive energy and the momentum that comes from that to focus on the challenges that are ahead. And so I have a number of questions to encourage people to think about the gain and the progress they've made before they go ahead and look at the gap. So that's one on the internal side.
That is really important. I think that's again, it's a very profound point, that you can focus on the chasm before you, or you can actually look at the small steps that you're making on a regular basis and celebrate those.
Yeah, on the external game, one of my favorite things is inviting the clients that I work with to create what I call a personal operating manual. We all have our own values, operating styles, when we're usually available to meet, what effective one-on-ones may look like, how others can get the best of us. And there's so much power in documenting that and taking time to just write down, like, okay, let's say I'm a toy or something like that. A toy is going to come with an operating manual of how it works. And I always encourage the people that I work with, and it's an exercise early on in a coaching engagement of, let's identify, like, what is your leadership style? How do you want to show up? If you're hiring someone new, what should they know about you? And it can really avoid a lot of the friction or confusion that it can create with direct reports or various partners. Even if you don't share this operating manual with others, the exercise of documenting this is really valuable. But I always encourage, like, go out and now share this with your team so they can better understand how you operate. Anyway, that's one of the things I work on the external game. And in the book, I share how to do that. There's a roadmap for creating that.
And I guess when you put something in an operating manual, you've set it out. It's out there. It's not in your head. And if it's out there, you can look at it and say, well, that's not so good. I'd like to modify this element of it. I'd like to show up slightly differently at this point. So you actually have an agenda for action, as well as an understanding of what you might want other people to know about how you operate.
And in that, it's including areas of development. And so I think it's good to be vulnerable and share with your team, like, here are the things that I'm working on, that I'm trying to get better at, and holding yourself accountable to that as well.
Yes, 100% agree with you. I wish you luck. I really hope, Nathan, that the book is a big success. It's going to be available by the end of May, and it's available as an ebook. It's available as a paper book. You can take your pick of sources for either, but it's called The Unconquerable Leader, and it's by Nathan Tanner. Check it out. It's worth reading, I promise you. Nathan, thank you so much for your time. I've really appreciated the opportunity to talk to you today.
My pleasure, Nigel. Thank you so much for having me.
That's it. Officially at the halfway point of the year, another show over. Absolutely tons to take away from today's discussions. I have my notebook out, but Nigel, what sort of stood out for you?
I loved hearing about the research that we got from David James. And it is quite surprising, this shift around where the prefavored learning mode is online now, and the opportunities to expand and develop online learning from being slightly boring and individual and insular to being collective and communal. So there's a lot in that report which is terrific, and the whole philosophy, I think, of 360-degree learning is about community and about communal learning. So the report seems to back up the direction that the company is taking, and that is always interesting. But I also enjoyed talking to Nathan Tanner, and I like that emphasis on preparing yourself internally. I tend to get that, and I agree with it, that it's very hard to be a complete mess internally and be serene and calm externally. You can do it for a bit, but not the long term. And also, if you've got a series of values you're trying to impose as a leader or develop as a leader, and you don't live those in your more general life, people will smell a rat, I think. They'll find it very, very difficult to gain credibility, essentially. So they kind of complement each other in a way. They're all about a kind of holistic community development and a focus on big, deep values about who people are and coming with people rather than ignoring them or imagining that just tell them what to do and they'll do it. It's a bit more complicated than that. Do you agree?
Nobody is an island, right? Nothing happens in isolation. We're social creatures, we're a social species, and I fully believe in that. I was on a call the other day, somebody asked me a question. If they'd have just put that in writing and asked me in an email, I don't know that I'd have had good answers. But because we were brainstorming back and forth, I had loads of things to say, and that's because that working out loud, that social connection, that collaboration, just brought out completely different answers than I know if I was staring at that, it within an email. So yeah, I fully agree with that. The creative and collaborative process.
Yes, exactly. Let's put a finger up in the air or fist up in the air for creativity and collaboration. Completely agree. Well, Kate, what have we got else on? What sort of conferences, events?
Well, opportunities to go and be collaborative and build out your network and be struck by inspiration to go back and be creative. So we've obviously got the summer kind of break coming up now. Kicking us off in September, new school year, new season, is Learning Live from our friends at the LPI on the 11th and 12th of September. World of Learning hits Birmingham on the 8th and 9th of October. Unleash World is happening in Paris on the 16th and 17th of October. The CIPD annual conference is the 6th to the 7th of November. And then over the other side of the pond, DevLearn hits on the 6th to the 8th of November in Las Vegas. So get your diaries out, get your travel planned. Now is the time to book in advance for all those great opportunities.
Yes, and we'll be back. You can get your travel plans, bring them closer to home, because we'll be back on the 25th of July. Note that in your diaries. We'll see you then. Thanks as always, Kate, for everything, and thanks for what you do for Learning Now TV.
It is my privilege and my pleasure. We'll see you all next month.